Now, it's mostly because we're all used to what you see on screen, kind of the same feeling I had with the first Grand Theft Auto recently, but when we look back at the first Burnout, it looks and feels quite generic by today's standards. Just a few different game modes that aren't different from each other. It only took a few hours to complete the championship, and the driving mechanics were too loose to get any real enjoyment out of it. Only when things went horribly wrong did it translate to things going right. It was a short, simple arcade racer with one party piece that would eventually define the series for a couple of generations. And although it only sold just over 1 million copies across all platforms, it was a promising enough concept at the time for Criterion to continue exploring. The renderware engine, also developed by Criterion, was becoming a prominent heart of a lot of upcoming video games like Grand Theft Auto and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and because they knew all about it and what the players wanted this time round, they were set to break every rule in the book once again. They knew improvement was the only option. Like the predecessor, Burnout 2 Point of Impact was released for the PlayStation 2 as a timed exclusive on October 2002, before eventually releasing for the Nintendo GameCube and Xbox on May 2003. Since I'm using the PlayStation 2 version for this review, at least I don't have to worry about this. It's like a song you hate but can't get out of your head. But also like the predecessor, this is a request most suggested on Patreon. Well, it was actually Burnout 3 Takedown that won thanks to Alex Vidal, but since I haven't looked at this one yet, and I prefer to review a series in the correct order, it would be foolish to skip it as some of the features from Point of Impact are precursors to what would eventually become series staples that we all love today. So what I'm gonna do is review Burnout 2, then Burnout 3 straight after that. That said, if you want your suggestion reviewed on this channel, then support on Patreon. The link is in the video description. Okay, graphically it looks promising, even before reaching the main menu with an NTSC output option even if you live in the PAL region. It might not appear in the footage because I currently don't have the best setup to record PlayStation 2 footage, but on my TV it was running at 60 frames per second, and it looks good for a PS2 game. The developers' goals was to not exactly push the consoles to their limits, but to improve the quality and add a bit of sense of humor and personality. Just look at all these different types of cars being raced at once. If crashes were going to be a selling point, you might as well drive into the arcade town center beyond just the public roads. Driving the stock car, for example, instantly reminds me of Daytona USA. This is thanks to the developers going for a more American focus, so every terrain and road type can be included and provide a justifiable leeway for those additional cars, game modes, and rock-orientated soundtrack. I was initially worried with the way some of the environments looked, that it was going to take too many aspects from the predecessors like the highways or city centers, because they look eerily similar, possibly from only having so much time to make the game. But despite it technically being set on one map, there are 15 different circuits, variations, whatever you want to call them. Fact is, there's way more variety than the predecessor. I wondered if the developers ever thought about creating an open world map, which was by far the most popular thing to do at the time after the GTA series took off, like they eventually would with Burnout Paradise. Like the predecessor, it takes some getting used to anticipating when a car goes into a slide, because it does it by itself if you're not careful. And cars are different from each other. Compact, sport, muscle, all affect speed, handling, and likeliness to have a crash. But they have recognizable stats this time, so it's easier to figure out which one fits your driving preferences best. If you need practice, there's also a tutorial mode called Offensive Driving 101, where you learn all these different aspects and ways to fill your boost meter. But what I don't get is that everything is locked until you complete all the tests. It's a good idea as an optional mode, but if I was able to beat the first Burnout where the cars didn't control as well without any tutorial, I think this one is self-explanatory enough that it isn't mandatory. It just seems like a waste of 10 to 15 minutes to me. Anyway, because I anticipated how the car was going to handle right off the bat, from my point of view it's hard to tell whether the driving mechanics have improved or not. It still feels heavier than something like Need for Speed, and more like it just came out out of the arcade machine. I'm genuinely surprised none of the Burnout titles came out for the arcade. They would have been sick, but at least they're compatible with racing wheels if you have one. What stands out to me is the other gameplay elements that have significantly improved to fit better with these controls. Now, the way you feel the boost meter is no different from the predecessor. Drive dangerously, including near misses, driving on the wrong side of the road, perfect laps, gaining air. That's a new one actually. And when it's full, you can use it to increase your speed, but the time it takes to fill up the boost is shorter. Cars aren't as easily prone to accidents, they're not as sensitive. The gameplay speed is faster, you get a better sense of that from the sound and blur effects. And the traffic, despite the exterior camera angle positioned in a way that you can occasionally get blindsided, is otherwise easier to anticipate. You can potentially go almost a whole lap with the boost held down. However, when you use it 4 times in a row and still can't get more than 5 seconds ahead, then you know that AI rubber banding is back with a vengeance. I counted less than a dozen times when I was over 6 seconds ahead the entire game. No matter how good you are and what vehicle you're driving, it can even be a special one where the performance laughs at the peasants. All it means is the opponents will struggle to overtake you, but still impossible to pull further ahead at the same time, which means you could be on the perfect run the entire race, right up to the final few meters or feet, have a crash, 70-80% of the time, that's it, you lose the whole race. And believe me, it happened to me more than once. You just have to hope whenever you do crash, the opponent gets tangled in the wreckage. Sure, it's not impossible to have a perfect run, and the rubber banding isn't as strong as the predecessor, but there's still no real difficulty curve. Completing the championship mode with the same car is doable. Only after you do so and unlock the custom one does it increase its difficulty, because you're racing against the special cars and the tracks are raced in reverse, so you're spending more of the time facing the traffic head on the freeways, therefore more likely to get into an accident. The crashes look way more over the top, like the developers turned on the ragdoll physics switch or something. There's no such thing as a nudge and come to a stop. In this game, even the smallest dent causes the car to break more lights, windows, particles, more air. It certainly looks more cinematic, especially in slow motion. The developers knew this was the most enjoyable aspect for players, so what they did was create a game mode to take advantage of it, where the goal is to cause as much damage as possible with a single crash in multiple junctions. The more damage you cause and the more vehicles you hit, the more points and multipliers you get, and it's as crazy and fun as it looks. The footage speaks for itself. And harder than I thought to get the gold. Another game mode which is also nearly as fun and something that definitely set the seeds for the takedown mechanic in the sequel is the pursuit mode, where the goal is to take down a speeding driver before they reach the finish line. Unfortunately, the rubber banding does get in the way. When you hit them, even when activating the boost at the same time, they pull ahead a bit, so you can't just hit them repeatedly every 5 seconds, which to be fair would make it too easy. However, if you get in front of an opponent after hitting them like this, suddenly the car is moving faster than it's programmed to, and it counts as a crash. I thought I won at that moment. I admit, I'm probably just used to taking down cars instantly one by one because I'm also currently playing Burnout 3 at the time of this video, so whenever a car requires 10 shunts to take down, it feels more tedious. Besides, both these game modes are way better compared to the predecessor. That one had face-off, regular race without traffic, and survival, see how far you can go without crashing. That's about it. And again, it's the change in structure that's the difference maker. In Burnout 2, most of the game modes are integrated into the championship, and combined with the additional circuits and unlockables, it takes twice as long to complete. The only nitpick I have is that the crash mode wasn't integrated into the championship as well, which makes it a little more more repetitive than necessary, since all the events here, apart from Pursuit, involve winning races, so you're supposed to be avoiding accidents like these to increase your chances of advancing through the game. And even then, all you gotta do is go to the main menu and select it. Then you'll be hooked for longer. Again, just a minor nitpick, most likely the result of me currently playing Burnout 3 during the writing of this review. My feelings towards Burnout 2 Point of Impact are the same as those when I reviewed Midnight Club 2. It might not look like much of an improvement on first impression, in fact it has the exact same issues as its predecessor, but when you actually play it, there's enough polish on the little details where the positives from the predecessor are elevated enough to actually still be worth playing today if you can find it cheap, as well as create the stepping stones for the series about to reach masterpiece levels. Unfortunately for Acclaim Entertainment, they wouldn't follow suit as poor sales and continued controversial business decisions led to their demise. One of the most notable stories for Burnout 2, for example, Acclaim promised to pay back anyone from the UK who committed a speeding fine on the day of the game's release, which the government didn't take too kindly to. Less than a couple of years later, they would file for bankruptcy, and EA not only became the new publisher of the Burnout series, but also purchased Criterion. Burnout 2 is a game that fits perfectly between these two. Like Criterion were finally starting to put their foot down, metaphorically and literally. Take it on its own merits. It's faster, there are more game modes, more content, the crashes are entertaining, it's simply an improvement. And things were only going to get better from there.